What are you saying, people? It's another episode of The Social Worker and the Mentor. Guys, just to say thank you very much for all the support and love you're giving to myself and to Rob. We've got some new content that's out on the Patreon. So like I said, just make sure you go on there, click on and subscribe, because you're going to see myself and Rob doing things a lot more differently outside of the studio. Also for university students, there's a lot of stuff going on in terms of CPD. And also, if you do want to inquire to come on the podcast, or you want myself and Rob or to come and visit, just email the social worker and mentor at gmail.com. So people, we've got a very, 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 very special guest today. So I'm going to start with someone on my left. You've already seen him come on before, but Sean, introduce yourself.
Hello everyone, I'm Sean from Equal Star. I'm here today to talk about social services and the aspect of parents and the complaints that they have against authorities in general.
Thanks, Sean. Chloe.
My name's Chloe. I have got a company called A Living Colour. I'm a journalist and I am a parent.
Thank you. And
my name is Sally. I've got a background in working and delivering services for government. Goes back about 20 plus years.
Thank you. Clap for yourself, please. Clap for yourselves. I just want to say thank you for all of you for coming today, because I think for a long time I've wanted to, with this podcast with Rob, have the opportunity where I can to be able to hear the feedback from parents. Parents are, we say in social work that are our stakeholders, because they're the ones who are accessing the services, and they're the ones whereby we're actually having a lot of intervention with. But for a long time, particularly online whilst doing this podcast, there are many, many parents across the country who are very, very unhappy with children's services, in terms of maybe their own cases and also their experiences. Now, obviously, each of you have all kind of supported and worked with parents. So kind of what I want to do today is be able to hear from all of you the work that you've done with parents, maybe your own experiences, and also what are the systemic issues from local authorities that has impacted upon families. And I want you all to be as honest and as real as possible, because it's about learning and it's also about change. So I don't want you to hold back, but just be honest in terms of what the parents have actually been saying to you, and also solutions in terms of what you think needs to happen in order for the system to change. I'm not going to start with you, Sean, because Sean's already been on the podcast already. So I'm going to start this way. So Sally, I want to come to you in terms of your experiences working with parents, and what are the issues that you're seeing within the system impacted upon families, and why there's mistrust with children's social care.
The easiest way to say it is it's very broken. There's a disconnect between services, referral processes. There's a disconnect with remembering that services should not be done to, they should be done with the parents. So there's not a lot of listening. There's not a lot of understanding. There's a lot of bias. There's so much fear wrapped up in children's services from a parent's perspective. They don't want to even engage. And even when there is need, or somebody understands they need to do something, they just won't engage with them. They'll avoid it all costs. And I think social workers, as they're coming out now, they're not getting the experience either. They're not getting an understanding. So, and I think somebody needs to take the bull by the horns, because it's the same in every social services department.
And so what I want to ask Sally, because one of the things that you mentioned, and I think is a very, very important point, even on social media, parents are very fearful of social workers, and I'd be very naive to go and say that I don't hear that a lot. And I know as someone whereby, particularly because when I started, I worked in child protection for over 9 years, and a lot of the times I remember being a social worker when I would go and visit a parent, in terms of a referral coming in, parents were very, very much shaken when I was on their doorstep. And the first thing they go and say is, "Are you going to go and take my child away?" And I'd say no. And I would also kind of explain the process to parents when working with them. And because of the kind of team I was in, I was maybe a parent or child's family social worker for maybe like a year or 2 years, just by the virtue of the team I was in. So I was able to kind of build that relationship with parents and obviously kind of let that kind of fear kind of diminish, so to speak, because it is about relationships. But do you think it's about the system, or is it about how the individual social worker is approaching that parent in terms of their case, which is why parents are very fearful, or is it a bit of both?
I think it's a bit of both. I think you've got social workers that are stretched beyond their limit often. They're undertrained. They will default to this position where I'm here to assess, to risk manage, I'm here to judge. And often that judgment will be based on things that they've either experienced where they've been at fault and they're defensive, or they're looking at the situation of this family, and often they haven't got the time. They don't want to go into that lengthy assessment process. They'll come down on a family, they shut a family down, that escalates, it moves forward in a very negative way. And I think the system itself is beyond broken. There is no equity in assessment processes. There's no understanding of how I can work with two different families with exactly the same issues going on, and both those families will be dealt with differently. And you might want to say that's because of the social worker, but we have rules. We have support systems in place for social workers. There is supervision processes in place for social workers. There shouldn't be this disparity within cases. It's chaos. It's complete chaos. How can a family work with chaos? They're already in chaos. Often they're on the radar because they're in chaos or they're struggling. And when you get you and I both know, we get some personalities, social workers, they come out newly qualified or they're ill prepared to deal with a conflict in a family. I don't believe their training is adequate. They don't know how to deal with conflict. They may have gone through certain training, but you need experience to hold a space to manage a family and what they're going through. And I think the dynamics of that relationship really needs to be looked at, because families are being broken, not by their own actions or what they're going through, but by the actions of services. Services are breaking them as much as they're in a chaos themselves. I mean, I know it sounds awful, but I don't advocate families getting involved with social services. I advocate that they solve problems themselves. I advocate that they look for other solutions, take action where they need to, but I advocate that they don't attach themselves to social services unless they've got no choice. Because historically, families used to look to social services to aid them. They don't anymore. They don't. So.
I'm going to come back to you, Sally. I'm going to come back to you. Chloe?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a parent, but I used to work in housing for quite a significant amount of time, where I would deal with a lot of antisocial behaviour cases, which kind of overlap with social services getting involved. Things of that nature. And so I would have to kind of sit down with people that have come out of care, sometimes sit down with their parents, liaise with them about whatever's going on around the house with social services and antisocial behaviour and how that's impacted their sort of like everyday interactions and stuff. And it can be really, really challenging. So like I've been to meetings before where it's myself, somebody from social services, somebody from the legal team, as well as the client and the parent. And the parent do not want to engage with housing and social services. And I feel like there's like this almost like similar feedback that is like given towards people that work, professionals that work in housing and social services. Is like a stigma that's attached, and it's like clients seem to be very distant with us. And I think it is based on things that have happened historically, and the systemic problems that come with working in being a housing professional, being somebody that works in social services as a professional, and it almost being like a tick boxing exercise sometimes, where the client isn't actually being cared for. And it's, as I said, just very much a tick boxing exercise where you literally go in, do your job, go home. And the people who are supposed to be, you know, the priority are not really being cared for or heard a lot of the time. And so it makes it difficult for those of us who genuinely do want to go in and help, genuinely do want to go in and make a difference, and feeling that resistance.
Yeah.
And it makes it harder for them to engage, like you said. So it is a very much a systemic problem, and also resources. You know, being a professional in the industry, it's very hard to kind of be somebody who does want to care and support young people, and feeling like you're stretched, feeling like there's not enough hours in the day. You're often going home and doing work, doing caseload work, coming back 9 a.m. the next day with a fresh case. And it's very, very overwhelming. So the system, as you said, is broken. And there needs to be sort of like this rewiring or a complete dismantling of the system and a rebirth, because I feel like it's failing all people involved. In my opinion, that's been my experience.
That's clever. Sean?
Well, you know, you know about our position on that.
Yeah.
Qualified immunity. It's a big thing, especially when social case workers, they're dealing with parents. And then you'd have one person deciding this threshold is being met and another saying, no, that's not the case. And then you get that different outcome. So they're thinking, how comes their child got taken away? I kept mine. And then on the balance of play, you'd say, well, you've been involved with, say, child abuse. And then there's someone said, oh, we've come into your home. It's not very clean, it's not unhygienic, it's not a safe space. And then one will keep the child and the other won't. And then be thinking, how is that possible? When culturally, society-wise, everyone would agree that's worse. And then it's odd because the caseworkers had training. So I said, how can you be trained? Go for all these qualifications and things like Chloe said, the tick box exercise. And then you're still coming out with varying outcomes when there's different circumstances, or if they're the same circumstances, one will be forced into adoption or the parent will lose the child. And they say, well, what about, say, the dads? And I said, why don't you think that it's not even considered? And I think a part of that is the cultural background as well, because people come in there, as you know, I told you before, 81% of caseworkers are women. So there's a disparity when it comes to father engagement. So that becomes the next thing. And then when the father and mother becomes adversarial, they're like, oh, well, we're not going to do that because we've got this context of violence against women and girls. We've got the context of, you know, in domestic abuse, domestic violence. Men are seen as the perpetrators culturally, even though that may not always be the case. And then they go in there with that kind of mindset when they're dealing with parents in conflict. And then obviously the family courts as well. They come in there and basically they're there to support. They see, as parents see the system, it's like a machine, cog in a machine. They said these agencies are all working against parents, so that creates the distrust as well as the injustices that people suffer.
Yeah, I was going to touch upon what you were saying because I think right now at the moment, because there's a lot going on in terms of the family courts, and I know for a lot of parents, they do see the family courts and children's service local authorities as one entity, which I'll just keep it real. That's what many parents' viewpoint is, and there are lots of parents who feel as though that there isn't any balance within the family courts pertaining to their own cases. Where is the disparities within the family courts from what you've all kind of, the parents you've worked with? Because like I said, on social media, there's a lot about the family courts. There's a lot about the systemic issues families speak about within the family courts. Many of the comments that I've seen from families is that there's biases in terms of assessment reports that are written about them, biases in terms of decisions that are made, biases also from social workers that is reflected within decision making at various hearings. And there's a big distrust from families whereby they're not keeping quiet. They are actually saying, no, this is what is going on for my own case. Would you say, is that consistent?
Yeah, from what I've seen.
Yeah,
definitely. I've definitely seen that. What happens is when they go into court, and there's a Section 7 report. There's a lot of time where parents dispute what's gone on, and it's a case of he said, she said. But I've seen a few cases where people have got, even though they said it's not really allowed, they recorded it. And they said, look, I've got ocular proof of mistreatment, child neglect, there's safeguarding issues. And there seems to be like a culture of like, no, we don't really want to transfer residency. We'd rather put them into forced adoption. And that's where the mothers come and say, that's madness, because how can you have forced adoption when the safeguarding, in their mind, the safeguarding threshold is not being met? And there's no need for child protection. And they're saying, well, there is for things, like I said, unhygienic homes. Oh, the child's missed a few schools, truanting, you're not monitoring them properly. But then I said, and then they'll come out and say, yeah, but I've got, say, case law, where I've got something similar, a case similar to mine, when they go in there with their briefs and said, why haven't this person lost their child?
So they're making reference and comparing and saying that it's the same case, but
they assume that, obviously, because we're members of the public, we don't know much. But I said, anyone that can read and write can find out this kind of information.
Yeah, give it the case. There's case law.
There's case law that they can go to, because I've done that before. So look, case law.
And I've spoken to you. You showed me.
It's just like, how is that possible? And it's like mental coma over. So I said, how can you be? And then some of them magistrates, they're like basically judges in training, so they're not au fait with a lot of the regulations. It's just like one in, one out. It's like a farm. Yeah. So I said, how can you then expect parents then not to be upset and expect them to trust and come to here for mediation? Because a lot of the time, a lot of parents and families I know, they don't really want to involve the system like that, especially. No.
Of course, yeah. Which is what Sally said. Yeah. Which is Sally said. Yeah.
That's why, because of these kind of outcomes.
Yeah.
And then obviously you got the Star Hobsons, the Labajanos used.
Yeah.
The Baby P. Yeah. It said there's a train load of cases where it said, look, this public, high public, you're saying you're gonna do these reforms and have these serious case reviews like you talk about. I said, but then why does these keep occurring? It can't just always be down to resources, because some of the cases I've seen is, to me, is clear as day. Yeah. But then this qualified immunity and interpretation seems to warp what would be, to me, straightforward, like, yeah, maybe we should consider change of residency. Or you've got no grounds against the mother, because it said that these are things that you catch anyone on an odd day in a snapshot of their life. They're not ideal. You could see them shouting at the child, or maybe they've left plates in the sink, or they haven't hoovered, and then you're also using that as a thing to try and coerce child out of the home. Is there like a target you have to meet? So people start questioning that. Yeah. And as you know, Sally.
Yeah, I was going to come to Sally, yeah.
Was it the Voice of the Children that you made me part of? There's a host of mothers in there that, like, they're visceral. Yeah, they're truculent. Said, no, we can't have this. We don't trust them. We're never going to deal with them. I hope when you go on there, Sean, you take them to task, because this is what's going on every day. And it's terrible.
Sally?
There are pathways in accessing services or stakeholders wrapped around the court. So it's almost like a recipe. And if you're a woman and you know that you've separated or there's conflict in a relationship, whether there's social services involved or not, invariably social services become part of it, even if they're the threat of involvement. So if you're looking at family court, there's multiple pathways. The pathway a woman will go on because she wants financial support for a court case will be one that says there's some sort of abuse attached to this relationship, because instantly she is secured in funding for that court process. She can access it's a tick box. As soon as she says, I've been experienced domestic abuse in some way, I've sat in rooms with solicitors where they have said, she's said no, and they have said, well, did your husband ever stop you buying something you wanted? Well, yes, he stopped me buying, I wanted to go shopping one day. Financial abuse, that's it, we've got it, that's it. So signed. I only ever speak the truth, so I can only talk from what I've witnessed, okay? Yeah. But the pathway to get on to be able to separate amicably or to load yourself up, because it's a bit like tooling yourself up. As soon as you go, you know you're going in that family court process, you have to wrap around you all the strengths you can physically find, mentally or emotionally find. This is a clear one, okay? So you get on that pathway and you think, right, I'm going into court, I'm bringing all the guns out, I don't care, my children are my children, I don't want to be with my husband anymore, I don't want to be with my partner anymore, and so the process begins. Now that court process will normally involve CAFCAS involvement, because as an advocacy service for children, meant to be an advocacy service for children. Courts normally default. They are probably the biggest voice as a stakeholder in the court system. Children's services are not always involved. CAFCASS tends to be in a family court. So they'll come involved. Social services will often be threatened because domestic abuse has been cited, because it secures the funding for the woman to go through court, and the court process begins. If we talk about parity or equity in how children are assessed or children's needs are assessed, I can tell you now, I've dealt with many cases, so many I've lost count of now, but in all cases that I've ever dealt with, CAFCASS does not pay the same attention to assessing a father and his relationship with the children as they will with mum and the relationship with them. In fact, they may visit mum, talk to mum, maybe spend 3-4 hours going through an assessment process. Dad, if he's lucky, will get 20 minutes. And it's over the phone. It's not face-to-face, and it's not where the children are involved. In terms of children's services, because of lots of reasons around domestic abuse, and I mean, to be honest with you, I have not dealt with any cases going through family court that haven't got a domestic abuse tag attached to them. It's a given. When children's services get involved, it's either as a threat and they're on the sideline, or they are involved. They will heavily rely on CAFCASS unless the children are under some form of protective or assessment. They're either under protective order or they're going through an assessment. Now, the process with all of these services, including family court solicitors, CAFCASS, women, children's services, and peripheral like parenting services, all of those services, or a large proportion of them, have been trained under the same remit. They're all trained from a perspective that domestic abuse is only something a woman experiences. And while I know this, I can quote stats until they come out of my head. I mean, I could sit here for an hour and a half quoting different stats with you. But the simple fact is, as soon as that process begins, there is a bias. There is a conscious and unconscious bias. And everybody's mindful, thinking they're putting the children at the centre of that. And in actual fact, it's not. The system is at the centre of that. And there is no difference.
I want to hold you to what you're saying. You mentioned about the system being at the centre. And I want to kind of widen that as well. Would you say the same, Sally, in terms of children's services? Because when this episode does eventually be released, I know there'll be loads of parents who say in the comments they absolutely do agree with what you've said about the system at times being at the centre of the work that's being done with children, young people and families. So I want you to can you elaborate a bit more on that? Because I think that's a very, very pertinent point that I think the viewers do need to hear a bit more from you. I know what you mean, but could you elaborate a bit more on that? So
the system is born from judgment. It is born from assessment and judgment. The responsibility of every provider, whether you're a stakeholder delivering direct services or you're on the peripheral, you have a responsibility in terms of safeguarding. So as soon as a family walks into the room of a service, straight away they're already on that assessment process. And they always will be. And it doesn't matter whether you're going to housing, I've delivered housing.
There has to be some form of assessment.
It doesn't matter where you're going. There's an assessment process that you're going through.
Or screening.
That is the system. That system is connected. And it has a set of identities that is looking at a family saying, where do you fit? Right? And any professional that tells you that's not in place is lying to you. And that's
we're all being assessed, isn't it? You're all assessors, everybody is. The system itself is, if you imagine, one of the things I don't like is putting name tags on anybody or anything. The system itself has got those sets of pathways for a family, and it goes in there looking at where am I going to position you? Where do you belong in my working day? Do you need my help or care? If you're a good person and you genuinely want to see that family survive, your perspective on that is going to be, what can I give to you? I got my training, but what can I give to you to limit how much intervention? It's about you.
Because it's about you. You have the ethics and values that want that family to succeed.
That's right.
But the system, you've got a boss who supervises you, so have you. The system is layered. It's got
There's a hierarchy.
There is a hierarchy.
Some
social. I know very few good social workers, I have to say, and please forgive me, because I know people have got great hearts going into their job. But they are only limited to the amount of support they get from it.
I agree.
That system and the training that goes on within that system is extremely warped. It's extremely biased. It's not preventative. It's judgmental, and it's reactive to judgment. It's not reactive to what somebody's seeing or how they're listening.
The person.
It's not reactive. Me, I work preventatively. As soon as I started delivering services, I looked at how I could create a step-up model. Because the intention is you go in there, you create dependency, that family is going to be a cycle, and their children is going to be a cycle.
Yeah.
You work preventatively.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Spot on, yeah.
So for me, you're not just walking in, a family's not walking into your room, it's walking into 4 or 5 rooms.
Yes.
And all of those, I've been in child protection meetings, I've been involved in families, heavily involved in families, and you can sit in there and there may be 8 or 10 people around that room, and all of those people are decision makers. Education, health, mental health,
Police. Yeah.
You know, it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So,
and what you're saying, I will come to you, Sean. And what you're saying, Sally, you're right about. What you said is actually very, very powerful. That when a family does get referred in, you forget how many rooms that they're going to be walking into, because they could be walking into a schoolroom with professionals.
Yeah.
A child in need meeting with a social worker, a conferences with other professionals, or the family courtroom as well. That's 4 rooms that I've already counted. Or if a child is in care, a contact centre, that's 5 or 6 rooms. And I think what you've mentioned about, you're absolutely right. And I think as a system and as professionals, we don't always actually go and see that, and how that pathway does have an impact on families who are accessing our services. And I think one of the points that you did make, which I will say, is that yes, as social workers, we do have a caseload of the young people and families that we are working with. But it's what you said and we got to reflect on. How many rooms is that family actually going to be in? How many social workers and professionals do they have to see? And that's part of the bit that I think you're right about, that we also have to reflect on, that actually the processes, whether it's family court or child in need meeting or child protection core group meeting as well, is very daunting for a family.
100%.
You know, and that's also notwithstanding the systemic issues that families are going through, because it does impact upon the social workers as well within this. And as you said, you're right. When you do work in a statutory setting, as a social worker, even if you have got all the goodwill in the world and your heart is pure, I'm just saying, but you've got a good heart, you want to do a good job, you're also limited with the constraints. So I actually think what you said, I fully agree with what you're saying, that we have to look at that in terms of the actual system. But I'm gonna come back to you. I want to come to Chloe and Sean. I will come to you, Sean. Go on, Chloe. So sorry, but no, you said a brilliant point. Go on, Chloe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much to add, to be honest, because you guys hit the nail on the head. But just to touch on the last point that you made about, you know, it being very daunting for family to come into a room where they're being assessed by a bunch of professionals and to even have those types of conversations. I've been in meetings, whether it's been like a social needs panel to talk about their housing needs, or a MARAC meeting or whatever, and it's incredibly daunting
as a professional
to be there with other professionals who are even more senior than me or on the same level as me, to be able to have those kind of conversations about sort of like very complex caseloads. But then for the client to come in and to see all of these professionals who already have these formulated judgments about them, or these preconceived ideas about them already, to come into that space is very daunting for them.
Is.
You know, so yeah, I just echo everything that you guys have said. It's it is a systemic problem, and it's like I said, it needs dismantling, and there needs to be like a whole revision of how to kind of improve it, because like I said before, it's not just failing young people, parents, it's also failing us as professionals. And for those of us who the small percent, or the percentage of us that do go into it with pure intentions, a lot of us leave these professions coming out of it saying, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And not because we don't want to do it, and not because we don't care about our clients.
The system's broken them down as well.
It's broken, and we're human at the end of the day.
I agree.
And there are only so many hours in a day, and we also have families, and we need to have the kind of like mental capacity to be able to leave our profession, to go home and be safe and stable enough for our own families, you know what I mean? So it's hard. And when I left housing, that was literally my sentiment. I was like, I went in because I wanted to make a difference. I identified that there was a problem, and I wanted to go in. I was very hopeful going into it, wanting to help fix a problem. not realizing that the problem is much bigger than myself, and it is a systemic problem, and that I can't fix it alone. And as much as I'm doing all that I can do, I'm feeling depleted every single time.
Yeah.
And then I'm going home carrying it, and it's impacting how I'm interacting with family.
Yeah.
Not even realizing subconsciously. And even when you go and speak to your sort of like senior members of staff or your peers and stuff, some of them are completely disassociated.
They've checked out.
They've completely checked out. And so it's like you feel like you're a lone soldier trying to fix a problem that is way bigger than yourself. So a lot of us end up leaving these professions.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sean? Go on, Sean. Yeah.
Pressures coming in, so there's no connection there. You might see one, say you on one day, and then one of your colleagues in another, the families.
Yeah.
They're thinking, where's the continuity?
Yeah.
And then it's like starting all over again.
Yeah.
But
start again syndrome, yeah.
I noticed with the families when it comes to the courts, like what Sally said, that it's all underpinned by, the LASPO Act. For once the Tories cut the funding, is to try and reduce the amount of state support they're giving in family court cases. That's when they had the big disparity, and obviously the resources where you and people from your profession and CAFCAS going to be overworked. So they brought in the LASPO Act to prevent, say, people slipping through the cracks, because obviously a lot of the social justice campaigners were saying, well, if you do that, there's loads of people that are going to suffer from abuse, child abuse, domestic abuse, and then you're throwing them out because you want to cut back on the money. So they done the LASPO Act to make sure that it didn't happen. But as a consequence, the referrals go up because they're thinking, oh, I can get free. If I say, as Sally said, domestic abuse, that's why I think the LASPO Act needs to be looked at again, because that was just a bean counting measure, cut funding. So they would receive less state support. And that's been a thing going on now since, I would say, 2008. And
one of the things I was going to say, because I'm just reflecting on, Sally, what you mentioned, that within the system that I work in as a social worker, for me, I've always believed that the best practice that I've got is the relationships that I have with families that I've worked with. And I can say from my own personal experience, I've rarely had poor relationships with families that I've worked with. Like I said, when I worked in child protection for as long as I did, because I was that family's maybe one social worker for a long time, I was able to speak to them openly about their case, the process, and being transparent. And they actually did appreciate that they did, because I think a lot of families, one of the things that I am also hearing as well is families also saying that there is a lack of transparency from their social workers in speaking to them about the process, in speaking to them about, every single layer, what is happening with my case, a lack of communication from them. That is also making them feel a big distrust from social services as a whole. And I think obviously even with this podcast as well, and like I said, it's not anything that I take personally, but even where at times I try to explain this is the process, this is and this, I know for many families, though what I may be saying should be happening, for them it hasn't happened in their own case. So many are very much triggered by, even if I'm saying, right, and it's not for them to actually go and say he's talking rubbish, or because they might go and say I am talking rubbish. But even though, because even with myself and Sean, I'll be honest with you, I remember, and it's okay if I say this anyway, because I remember even in the beginning when I had my platform with Robert, and me and Sean used to clash. Sean knows my family, do you know what I mean? Like he's friends with my family, everything, but we used to clash a lot, do you know what I mean? Not because he felt I was doing anything wrong, but I was saying this and this and this, and he was like, no, but it's this, this and this. And then one day he just messaged, said, Nana, listen, let's just talk on the phone. And Sean's cool. Do you know what I mean? Sean is cool. And we spoke. I was like, yeah, Sean's actually cool. He's like, listen, Nana, it's not you, but it's just the system. But I can see you're actually a decent social. Do you know what I mean? But that isn't the case for everybody. How do social workers, and I know, Chloe, you said it is bigger than me, it's bigger than all of us. How can social workers, even though the system is the way it is, how can we as individual, when I say individual, how can an individual social worker restore faith in the public and in families? What can an individual social worker do? Because I know for me is being open, my relationship, and families generally are happy with how I've been with them. But what can an individual social worker do to rebuild that trust? It's a big question.
It is a big question.
Yeah.
It is a big
But
question.
do you know what I mean, Sally? Because
No, I
because
understand.
because I'll be honest with you, and I'll say it here, I won't sit here and be naive to go and say there are not social workers who are rogue and don't practice well and are not biased towards families. Not naive. I'm not naive like that. It happens, and there's case law. I've seen it with my own profession. My profession, we're not absolved and absolute from not having people who don't practice well in the profession and are biased. And just in terms of how they are with families, there's issues. I'm not going to sit here and go and say that in every profession it's like that. But for my profession, what can a social worker do? What can even I do with this platform to try and restore faith with public and the families?
Okay, so I run businesses, yes, and I'm a coach, qualified. So the perspective I'll give you is probably from a different layer, many layers. As a social worker, you've chosen a profession that you need to put your energy into. You cannot sit there and say, I'm only going to be tick box. Because if you come in there thinking you can follow a system and tick a box, you're going to fail families.
Yeah.
That's without a doubt, okay? So as a social worker, you as a professional need to consider, who do I want to be in my role? My job requires this. My training in university has given me
You
that.
need to say that again to your camera. No. I want you to say that again to your camera. No, yeah, please, yeah.
So to the camera, you as a social worker, in your training, you will be trained in many ways. You'll have your training from university, you'll have your management system, but as a person, you have to take on board that your role is not just that. You cannot be a textbook of assessment processes and policies and procedures. If you think like that, you will be no good at your job. It's as simple as that. The person that you are, it is one of those roles where you have to sit back and think about, what fingerprint do I want to leave on families?
That's right.
Okay, how can I work preventatively? Regardless of what all of your environment, your supervision, your training, regardless of that environment, you need to sit back and think, I have to take my continuous professional development personal for the rest of my career.
Who am I?
I have to own it.
Yeah.
Because there are lots of things that you can do as an individual social worker that may not be reliant on. You're not going to go against your policies and procedures. You can't do that, but you don't have to rely on them. You could, for example, you can say, the way I deliver my services is going to be preventatively. I'm going to go in, I'm going to look at that family. I'm going to know my environment. Who are my stakeholders? Who can I refer to?
Yeah.
Where can I pull in advice and support for these families? I can see dad is going through that. I can see mum is going through that. Grandma's caring for these children. I can see she's going to that. What have I got in my community that I can call on to bring in as a resource? Because you haven't got the funds, and
It's true.
It's the way it is. So knowing your environment is part of your role. You can't be lazy with that. The other thing is, you are the voice of the child, and you forget that. Every social worker, you forget that. You think you are, you tell yourself are. Your ego goes in there saying, I'm trained, I know what I need to know, I'll walk in that room, but you are a filter. So as part of your voice of the child is every policy and procedure you've ever read, every management meeting you've been into, every court setting you've been into, that is your filter. The child is not your filter, but your child should be the filter. And that child is your child. Legally, you are a parent when you walk in that room because you're a decision maker in the parenting.
I agree.
So when you walk in that room, you are the parent. In fact, as if that progresses negatively, our system becomes the parent. So when you walk in that room, your job is to sit and listen as a parent. So whether that child is 14 and acting out, if they're showing you behaviours that are negative, you need to ask yourself, why am I thinking, feeling the way I'm at? This child makes me uncomfortable. You are that filter for that child. And then you represent that child in every setting you go in. That's the other thing that you do. In your management systems, you are a voice in that every corporate meeting you enter into, every strategy meeting you enter into, you have a voice. How you position yourself needs courage, because while 5 voices around that room are saying we need to get this child out of there or we need to do this, and you know that that's wrong, you know that there's other things that do, you are the voice in that room.
Yeah.
So you have to have the courage to say no to the system.
But you know, Sally, sorry to interrupt you, but you know, Sally, what you're saying, many social workers they struggle with that. and it's also just because of this platform and the fact that, you know, I meet with a lot of social workers and students, they do struggle at times to have that voice. I've never had that problem because for me, I've always believed that, you know what, if everyone around you is saying yes, but you have a conviction and say no, it's about how you articulate it to go and say, right, you all are saying this, but you know what, this is why I'm saying no. So even if you get overwhelmed, fine, but I would rather talk and say something when I know in my heart, this is what I think should happen, than not actually go and say anything. And then you almost in a way become a little bit complicit because you're correct. Because I've always said to social workers that, you know, particularly when you go into those meetings, families are not there. Your children are not there. So if you know there's a resource or there's something that you need to be able to fight hard in that room to say, and it can be difficult when you've got your big senior managers in front of you and you're a social worker quite low in the chain to be able to do that. Do you know what I mean? So, but I think you're right. But sorry to interrupt you. Sorry. Yeah.
No, well, I understand. I really understand. But when we harm somebody else or when we let ourselves down, we harm us. So if you harm a family in some way by not speaking up, your role is to speak up. That is your role. So if you harm somebody by not doing that, you harm yourself. You take your confidence, your self-esteem, you will become less than you are. No made me smile because I spent half my life teaching people how to say no. No is based on you've done your due diligence. So when you walk in that room, you know what's happened to that family. You've taken the time out to find out what's happened to that family. You know who's involved with that family. You know a recipe of solutions that family could receive. All you can do is put all of that on the table as a professional. Don't be lazy. Put it on the table. Yes. You say, it is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You drop your mic and you say, this is what I think. I'm speaking to this family. I know this family and how they're moving. This is what I believe. And then you listen to the thing. If they come back at you with a different decision, you say, well, I don't agree with this decision. I would like that to be noted, please. Then you leave it.
Yeah, you've done your bit.
You can only do what you can do, but you do it with passion and you do it with honesty and truth.
The thing with that though,
Go on, Sean.
I believe a lot of your colleagues are fearful of being managed out the process. So I know despite the profession that goes on in every industry, troublemaker, outspoken. So,
yeah.
say anything passive aggressive, what they do, the club will come out and say, listen, we need to get this one out. This one's going against the machine, the cog.
But do you know what, Sean? But it goes back to what Sally is saying. It's about the footprint you want to leave as a social worker.
You're courageous though. Sally's courageous. Not even,
no. And I get that, and I hear that, and I hear that all the time. That Nana, you're probably one of the few who use a platform and talk. But I've been a social worker long enough. Do you know what I mean? To know, and I know how important my voice is in arenas and spaces where a family is not there. Do you know what I mean? Sally made a point about the footprint that you leave. A family reached out to me that I worked with a decade ago. Yeah, remembering the work that I did with them and said, Nana, thank you very much. So I recognize that families and children, young people, they will remember their first worker to their last worker. They will always remember if you were positive or negative. And in the comments, people have gone and said, you know what, I had 12 social workers who were poor and were bad, but I had one social worker who's good. And I think, Sally, you're absolutely right. You have to be courageous in this job because of how the system is. And you have to be able to make a note and go and say, I do not agree with this decision. I want it noted. And obviously you've got to say to the family, look, I went to this panel. Unfortunately, they went and said no, but I did advocate. The family then will not be happy with the decision that's been made above you, but will be happy with the fact that you actually were their voice in that room. And I think you're absolutely right with what you're saying. I just want to bring in, sorry, Chloe, I just want to bring you in.
Yeah, again, just to echo what you guys have said, you do have to be courageous. And I think whenever you have that first initial engagement with them, it's about being human as well. Yeah. So it's discretion, right? So you're going in as a professional, but you're also going in as somebody who's human. And I think in life, a lot of the things that separate us are finances and qualifications, right? Everyone can be a step away from homelessness. Anyone can be a step away from
any point.
You know what I mean? All of these things from being having social services being interfering in
anybody can
anybody.
Have it.
So
anybody.
if we approach life and interactions with our client groups with that mindset and understand that they're human just like us, I think energy doesn't lie. So you go into a space like that with clients and you go in on a human level and they receive you in the way that you're presenting yourself to them. And I think even if it's unspoken, there is a
And families will know, they will know who's a good social worker and who isn't, and who's genuine. Families will know.
Everyone can read energy, so it's like you offer yourself to them as a human, but as a professional, and they're receptive to that, even if it's not necessarily displayed on their face. There is something inside of them.
They will know.
And it sets the tone for how the rest of your interaction is going to be.
Agreed.
And I think it's just being about being transparent with them as well. At all costs. But one of the things I was going to say is that, when you were speaking about being courageous, it is important, because I had a situation where I had a case where one of my clients was saying that they were a victim of DV, and it was a man. And I remember when I opened the case and I went to management and I said, look, he wants to be moved because he's suffering from DV from his partner. They had 2 kids. He's fearful to go to sleep at night in case she might kill him. Like, it was quite bad. And management were not very receptive to the idea that this was a serious case at all. And I was saying to them, what's the reason? Is it because it's a man? And they kind of like tried to skate around the subject, and they were like, no, but it's not, it doesn't seem serious. And I said, it's because he's a man. If this was a woman saying this and it was the same set of circumstances, it would be considered high priority. And they just weren't receptive. Anyway, I went above them. I formulated my notes. I sent it to their management and I said, look, this is a situation. I've done numerous home visits. They've sent me a bunch of emails, loads of evidence, which I won't really share. But and I said, we need to escalate this. And I went so far to the point where it was escalated. We did grant him a move, but my management were not happy with me because I had gone above their head. And I was, as you mentioned, deemed the rebellious one.
I've done that before, but I'm like, I've done it before, but I've owned it. And if you said to me to do it again, I'm like, I would, because it's
absolutely
what it is.
But this
I see people get pumped up.
But I believe that you have to have that
conviction.
You have to have that conviction to be in these spaces and to be these types of professionals. Otherwise, like you said, you're just going to be complicit, and really you're not changing anything if you're just identifying what the problem is and just doing the tick boxing thing.
And Sean said it, you'll be a cog in the system.
You are a cog in the system.
How did you feel about doing that?
Amazing.
Job
Amazing.
done.
And I would do it 100 times over.
But that is the thing. This is the thing, and I think that's what I'm saying. That I think it takes a lot, and I try and teach that to a lot of the mentees that I've got, particularly even students on placement, where it's a big, and I get why, but it's a big thing. There's a lot of fear to be able to go and say, I know the local authority is saying this. I do not agree with what the local authority is saying, but this is my view. So I know that for a lot it can be very, very difficult. But I agree with you that I think the main thing I would say is about showing your workings out. Yes. You have to also show, because I think there's one thing to go and say, right, I think the local authority is wrong about this, and just saying it, but I think you need to be able to show your workings out, as you said, Sally, earlier, the reasons why. You've known the family, you've known the case. I think I can do this bit of work more with the family. I think this is the resource that they need, and this is the timescale. So I think what maybe senior management are also looking for is that you need to be able to show your workings out in those meetings, so that they can see, okay, right, if this is the journey that you feel you can work with the family, that it doesn't need to have a court case, it doesn't need to go this, then right, it's workable, but obviously stay in touch with her. And I think, Sally, you're right. I think that's what's important.
Yeah.
And I think, Chloe, you're correct as well.
And also,
you know why those families do that? Because the mediation process, what I've seen over the years, it's bureaucratic. So it just drags out the time.
Yeah.
Our parents become alienated.
Yeah.
So they think, I'm going to go straight to family court because they're wasting my time. A lot of people don't trust the mediation process either. And like I told you previously, I think there should be an independent body from people, from the public and parents that have veto powers, not just they consult like this. They said, tell us your opinion, what you think. and then, oh, look, we've let them have their voice now, we can do what we want. That's got to change. There has to be an oversight from people. I'm not saying obviously just people of the street that don't have. There's got to be some training around the process and the thresholds, and they come and say, no, this is wrong.
Yeah.
You got to veto this decision.
Yeah.
You got to look at this one again. If you do that, there'll be more trust. And when I mean independent, properly independent.
Yeah.
Not like with the ombudsmen, when you got the former social workers marking the homework of current ones.
Yeah.
Because then it becomes like cronyism, and they're thinking, protect the machine because we represent the state and they must do what they're told. And that's the next thing that parents don't like.
Well, what I was going to ask you, just because of time, I want to ask you just 2 more questions. So I don't know if you all know that currently right now there is reform going on regarding the Department for Education, the Pathfinder. And what we're kind of looking at is a lot more kind of restorative work. So the family model. I know Sally's smiling. I know, Sally, you've got your views in it. But ultimately, that what we're basically saying is that we need to be able to look in-house first and come to families first, because I even said on the previous podcast that, you know, there's loads of children in the care system who genuinely do not need to be there. Before we even get to that point, we need to be looking. The moment we start that assessment, we need to be looking within the family first. What's your take? And I want to come to Sally first.
Okay.
What's your take, Sally?
So in 2016, I worked with a consortium of organisations and created a whole family domestic abuse service that was centred around the children. That I'm a restorative practitioner.
Yeah.
Okay. So that programme took us about a year to create. It was based on 50 years research, psychological, therapeutic intervention research, and it was paid by the South Wales Police and Crime Commissioner. We ran a pilot because we were promised money. We were promised money to be able to run a pilot. That was withdrawn and used for a different project. So we created this system and no ability to be able to run it. Managed to swing it so that we got social services, children's services involved.
Okay.
A specific department with lots of domestic abuse, drug and alcohol, all children on child protection. Run it for, it's a 24-week programme, run it for 24 weeks. The outcome of that programme was all families went through the programme, some separated amicably, didn't need any issues around family court or children's services.
Yeah.
Children's services withdrew from all cases.
Okay.
These were the outcomes are amazing.
Yeah.
Then trying to get that system into a female-centric world is almost impossible.
Okay.
Now that system exists with some very good outcomes attached to it. Restorative principles are very good because they work on what does this family need. Each person within the family, it will look at that. Then it will look at who are their tribe, who are the people that wrap around them,
Village.
that can yes,
Yeah.
who are the people that wrap around them that can feed into that. Now, the domestic abuse program we created was based on that principle. So if you had Auntie Maud next door, who's not really Auntie Maud, but she's witnessing the abuse, she comes in and is part of that 24-week programme. So when mum and dad are in denial, Auntie Maud is saying, well, actually, I've got some things to say about that. So accountability is held and the children are put at the centre of that.
That's right.
So the children's voices were included. For the 24 weeks, the children had a separate worker that listened to their voice, and the end outcome of that was a family plan where the children's voices were really included.
Yeah.
Mums and dads crumbled under listening to the children's voices because adults will say to themselves, you know, oh, they don't hear, it's after midnight, it's outside the room, they don't know nothing. Actually, children know everything.
Yeah.
So restorative principles are very good as long as they're implemented in the right way, as long as they can work preventatively and they can listen. So if you're looking at alternatives, if this programme actually really looks at alternative programmes that allow social workers to listen and are forced to listen to all the voices, you may have something that may kind of work preventatively.
Yeah.
I think what needs to happen is we need to have a non-female centric voice in the room. There needs to be people that advocate for all. So agencies that come in that room and have that voice. I've been part of steering groups, strategy groups. You know, there needs to be equal voices around that table, no matter what. Otherwise, it's just going to be regurgitating echo chambers of the same voices and the same narrative.
You know, to have the equity that's there. Chloe?
Yeah, I agree. There needs to be a sort of like holistic approach to it, and sort of like not relying solely on professionals to come in and fix the problem, and actually, you know, involve other people who have like seen certain things that have gone on that can kind of like advocate on behalf of the children or give some clarity on something that we might have missed as professionals. There needs to be sort of like a universal, like holistic approach to it. Just for you know, a better, fairer outcome. So yeah, if it can be executed and yeah, then yeah, I'm all for it.
Sean?
I like to see that apply consistently though, because I notice with these kind of programs, they do them for a few years. There's a change of power, change of management, or
Yeah.
and all of a sudden it's disbanded.
It's disbanded, yeah, understood.
That we're not counsellors and things like that.
Yeah.
That's where it's dangerous. Because I had a case where there was a teacher that pointed out that they were going across county lines, and they referred to child services. Child service said, no, we don't deal with that. We don't do that. I said, yeah, but she said it's like coercive control. They've been groomed to do this because they haven't done this before. They've got no history of this. But they were like, nope. And it depended, again, when I looked into it, money, time, resources. And they think, oh, you know, we can just disband that. There's no help. There's no hope there. It's terrible. Same with the thing with the DV. When it comes, I notice there's a disparity when it comes to ethnicity as well. There's some minorities are not seen as the same priority when it comes to cases. There were 2 women the other day that was attacked that I know personally. And when I went to the local MP and things like that, there was different outcomes. I said, wait a minute. One is where a pregnant woman got attacked in a co-op near where I live. And they basically swept on the carpet. There's not much we can do there. There's no CCTV. I had to get the CCTV from co-op and showed and said, what are you going to do about this? I had to go to my MP, my councillor for my ward. It's terrible. And even now, there's no story. So these kind of things. So there's tiers to this. Farm engagement. Then you got minorities that may not be born here.
The racial inequalities,
or ones that are colour, they're British, but they're they're not the ideal. You know, like someone like Sally is born here. They're natives. They think, oh well, this thing. There's more concern with that than they are like.
No, understood.
Because of me and Chloe's background, it's these things all come into it, and then it affects the outcomes. It comes to families and that.
I just want to ask you all just one final point. How can we bridge the gap between children's service social workers and families? If you can just give one short point of a potential solution. Because Sally, I'm definitely going to keep in contact with you, Sally. Yeah.
Ask the question again.
Yeah. So how can we bridge the gap? Or how can we build a bridge between social workers and families so that families do not feel fearful of the system, but fearful of social workers? Big question, I know, but just one point. It's hard because there's so much to it.
Okay, so I can't say that this is definitively going to work. And I feel like you guys may be more qualified to give an answer than me. But one consideration that I would propose is tailoring certain cases to social workers from similar ethnic backgrounds. I think that that's something that I thought about a lot. And I mean, like I said, I'm not a social worker, but when I was a housing professional and I was dealing with DV cases or antisocial behaviour cases or whatever, I recognized that a lot of the time, the more successful cases that I had, or the outcomes that were the most successful, were the ones where they felt that they could relate to me a lot more. And felt a sense of safety. And obviously you can't sort of like, that can't happen in every instant. And you can only do it right. But I think that is something to definitely consider. Because I feel like there is some pushback a lot of the time with maybe, and I know you mentioned it, you know, when you're particularly from ethnic minority, when you're kind of already in a system as somebody who is, you know, of colour, there are already kind of like racial tensions that you're kind of faced with when it comes to the system. And then when you're adding the housing element, social service element to all of those things, the disparity between it definitely allows you to have resistance towards these services as a person of colour. So I feel like maybe that's something to consider.
Sally?
I think there needs to be some other kinds of training that social workers have. I think the training they receive is not what they actually need on the front line.
Yeah, it needs, as in the degree.
Yeah,
it needs to be updated.
I think it's way out of date.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
Yeah, it's way out of date.
I'm sure you're not vocal. I've been on that. Yeah, it's not current. Yeah.
And I think empowering social workers to be true to their decisions and, you know, to be accountable to them. Because, I mean, I could ream off loads of bad behaviour that is incredibly wrong. You know, children left in sexual abuse, children, you know, left almost dying from elective starvation and nobody listening to any professionals around the state. You know, there's lots of things that are broken, and what happened is they close ranks. We all know this. I've been banned from 2 areas in Cardiff because I contacted a chair and said to a chair, you've got a family that's got 5 social workers in 12 months and the children are being sexually abused. And I went over the social worker's head, the manager. She banned me from working in any child protection meetings. I say this to you because there's no accountability. We bury this because we can't deal with it. So building social workers, building their self-esteem, their confidence, their decision-making, their understanding of families, and then on top of that, having accountability when it goes wrong, whoever's managing that, put that accountability and be transparent. Sean mentioned, Sean works from facts. That's the only way. Sometimes he's very passionate and powerful, but he only ever works from facts. It's the way he is. So having somebody who goes in and looks at those cases and says, what have you done wrong here? That forensically pulls that apart and says, you need to improve your department. Your management system is wrong. You know, your structure's wrong. So that accountability is needed. But empower your social workers. Empower them. Let them have truth. Let them be real. You know, and when they're not and they're naughty, then do what you need to do.
Sean, finally?
Qualified immunity. Say that again. Qualified immunity needs to be reduced. And discretionary powers as well, because that's what causes a lot of the different outcomes for the same circumstances. And that's what upsets parents the most. It's like a football referee. The referee says that's a penalty, and no one said, no, that's not a penalty. That's what goes on. And obviously it's more detrimental because it's families. So with you when you're working in there, as when you came into the profession as a man, especially from our background, what did you notice when you came in?
Not a lot of black men in the profession. Not a lot. And we don't want to go into it. We don't want to go into it.
Well, they say, from what I've seen, they said it's because of pay and obviously the mental load from. But
also we don't want to go into it at all. We don't.
But it's the same thing with teaching.
It's true. And why that?
You see, there's a lot of
it's true.
It's true. Positive recruitment.
I mean, I can almost guarantee. Sorry, Sean. I can almost guarantee that what you both take into the room is truth and prevention. There'll be something in your energy that says, I want to understand what's going on. I want to be truthful in how I conduct myself, and I want to prevent this escalating.
It's about integrity and credibility. That's very, very big for me. Integrity, credibility, and authenticity. That's how I work. It's a big thing for me. So But listen, guys, I want to say thank you so much for coming on today. I got to admit, the amount of wisdom that I've heard from all of you has been fantastic and it's been amazing. And I do want to say that even outside of this, I want to continue to keep in contact. Well, I talk to Sean all the time anyway, but Sally and Chloe, I do want to continue to keep in contact with the both of you. I mean, thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you for all of you for being honest and transparent with the issues within the system. And it's to let families know that, you know, we are listening and it's not, we're not burying our heads in the sand, but I think it's very, very important to hear from all of you. So thank you so much. So guys, just to say, if you want to follow the podcast, you know, just make sure you like, subscribe and share. And just to plug Sean, Sean's got his own organization called Equal Start. Equal Start. So do follow Sean and follow the work that he's doing. I don't know, Sally, if you're on social.
No, I'm a bit behind the scenes now. I'm kind of
social media. Sally, you're brilliant, fantastic work what you're doing, and Chloe as well. Thank you so much for your work as well. But guys, you know where to find us. You like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you soon.